In May 1997, the Simpsons episode, Homer's Enemy, debuted. It is most remembered for being the episode where Frank Grimes, a young man with a very troubled upbringing, moves to Springfield after being hired at the nuclear plant. His path eventually crosses with Homer's, whose buffoonery and incompetence are shocking to Grimes. But to his dismay, he is seemingly the only one at the plant that either recognizes or cares about Homer's shortcomings, even after Homer enters and wins a children's plant design contest. This is underlined by Grimes' visit to the Simpsons household, where he sees the sort of great life Homer has: his beautiful wife, happy children, spacious home, impressive achievements, and lobsters for dinner. Grimes, who has struggled all his life and yet still lives above a bowling alley and beneath another bowling alley, snaps at Homer, saying that he is what is wrong with America. Driven by this meeting and the plant's obliviousness to Homer's flaws, Grimes is driven insane in an effort to mimic Homer's incompetence, seeing it as the only way to succeed in this crazy town. He would eventually grab high-voltage wires, and in so doing, be killed. And so ends the life of one of Springfield's most intriguing residents. Many of you already know about Old Grimey and what he signified, that this was at least partially a meta-episode, where Grimes was meant to symbolize what would happen if a quote-unquote regular person was inserted into the Simpsons universe. As former writer and showrunner Josh Weinstein put it, we wanted to do an episode where the thinking was, what if a real-life normal person had to enter Homer's universe and deal with him? I know this episode is controversial and divisive, but I just love it. It really feels like what would happen if a real, somewhat humorless human had to deal with Homer. Likewise, producer George Mayer would say that Grimes' cardinal sin was that he shined a light on Springfield. He pointed out everything that was wrong-headed and idiotic about that world. And the people who do that tend to become martyrs. He said things that needed to be said, but once they were said, we needed to destroy that person. Obviously, I find this narrative really engaging, and it's something that, since watching this episode as a kid, has added real comedic and critical value to the episode. But I want to take a bit of a different route here, arguing that in many ways, we are all Frank Grimes today. This is less in the sense that the show portrayed, of how we would be driven insane should we be plopped down in Springfield, and more in how we can, like he did, work so hard and yet struggle to get ahead. Grimes looks at Homer's life and is shocked at how disconnected it is from his own. How Homer, seemingly without effort, has the sorts of things he can only dream of. Now look at this and tell me Old Grimey can't retroactively be read as a stand-in for the millennial generation. How he worked harder than most of those around him, but is farther and farther behind. Take this post I found on Twitter, which partially inspired me to make this video. The Simpsons used to be viewed as a portrait of a lower middle class family. They had a house, car, job security, and a single wage earner who didn't graduate college. These days, that's beyond unattainable. In some ways, people miss this nuance. Grimey isn't just upset at Homer for his incompetence, but also for the lifestyle someone can have that is so alien to his own. The Simpsons universe is an anachronistic one, especially a generation since this episode has aired. It is a universe where, despite financial struggles at times, Homer can support a family of 5 on one income, giving them not only necessities, but often the little luxuries of life. Certainly, the financial situation of the Simpsons family is not a consistent thread, with Homer holding over 100 different jobs, and Marge often taking work outside the home on a temporary basis. But the default position within the canon is that Homer has a decent unionized job with decent pay and decent security. They even have a dental plan. That's the life of an upper-lower middle-class family. You can see a breakdown of the specifics in a recent video by Vox. This is why we are all Frank Grimes, because we are in a world which sells us this vision of the good life, the one Homer often enjoys, but it is one we can't really hope to achieve under the current status quo of deep inequality and rising costs of living that aren't accompanied by wage growth, even as we become increasingly educated and productive, and even as society becomes more wealthy on aggregate. But lest this video be seen as an attack on boomers or on quote-unquote working-class Joes like Homer, I think it has to be said that Grimey's literal and figurative fatal flaw was that he focused so closely on why Homer had things he didn't deserve, rather than why his life had been so difficult. The trouble comes at the end of the house visit scene, where Grimey storms out of the Simpsons' home after blaming Homer for his lot in life, saying that he leeches off hardworking people like him, and that Homer essentially deserves to starve and suffer if justice had its way. In Grimey's mind, the reason he had a difficult life is because of people like Homer Simpson, and not because of, a system of capitalism that didn't give him equality of opportunity and that gave him so many systemic disadvantages. And this gets to the issue of today's politics. In some ways, working people, like Grimey, look too often at the small differences in compensation between one another and not at systemic issues which make it difficult for them to succeed. Homer isn't the reason Grimes has a bad life, and what Homer has is what all people deserve: a decent life with job security and the ability to care for your family. Rather, the issue is that inequalities in access to wealth, education, and other things lead some people, like Grimey, to have more challenging lives than anyone should have to bear. So in many ways, we are all Frank Grimes today, especially those of us from younger generations. But let's be clear, we don't have to make the same mistakes he did. Don't blame the Homers of the world for having a decent life from time to time. They aren't what's wrong with society today, in paraphrasing Grimes. Rather, we have to blame a system which makes what Homer has exceptional. So this was a bit of a different video for me than usual, but as a huge Simpsons nerd, it really did make sense to cover my usual political topics using the show as a lens. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by liking it, leaving a comment, and subscribing to my channel. While the majority of my content will be covering politics and history in a more traditional manner, expect future episodes about The Simpsons and other pop cultural sources. Thanks guys, have a good one, I hope to see you again soon.